welcome back to another EDH deck tech video. Today I'm going to be going over my Hazoret the Fervent deck. This is essentially the continual or steady growth of the Kari Zev deck. Hazoret here has just replaced Kari Zev. Kari has moved into the deck, and the deck is just... I've been basically just streamlining it. So this is a mono red aggro deck for EDH, and again I play the traditional 40 life format. This deck is still not very good because a mono red aggro based deck can really only take out one opponent. I try to play this in 1v1, but it's also very easy to get blown out on. So the actual use case of this deck is hard to describe, but in short, it's a fun deck. It's not a good deck though. So, I'm going to go ahead and show the current deck I have right now. Let's go over Hazoret real quick. She has seen a nice spike in price after the recent, was it the Pro Tour or whatever, where the Ramen-Up Red has just basically taken over, and she's a nice 2 of on the top end. She's a 4-drop 5/4 haste indestructible god creature. She cannot attack or block unless I have 1 or less card in my hand, and she has a pay 3 ability to discard a card to do 2 damage to each opponent. So having this in the command zone over Kari Zev, or even Zurgo, for example, is an interesting take. Kari always gave me access to a turn 2 creature, which was actually an issue since there's a lot of turn 2 creatures that competed with Kari Zev. Zurgo, Bellstriker, is just a personal, I don't like him. He is a good creature for this type of deck. He is probably the best general. I just don't like that card. Hazoret here answers one of the problems I've experienced with Kari Zev, which is you get blown out very quickly and you dump your hand, so sometimes you don't have a threat, or sometimes you have dead cards. Hazoret can be the last few points of damage. She can be a consistent swinging threat. I mean, the issue with Hazoret is always that literally something like a Capsize can just make you incapable of ever attacking or blocking with Hazoret. A timely bounce spell, for example, just ends you. But that's what we're working with now, and she's actually proven to be a bit better. So let's go through the deck. I have, this is the one I play. I have the crap one here. I have a buddy make me a 3D printed deck box, so I have this in the front of the deck box. I hate the invocations, so I like this one better. My favorite artwork is actually, I want to use this for the video, is Hazoret's Undying Fury, a card that is about 4 different ways of being just the dumbest card printed because they've... I'm not going to rant. I've ranted on that card to all my friends. So that's my favorite artwork of Hazoret. Unfortunately, it's not in the deck. So this deck has got a ridiculously low curve. It has 37 creatures plus Hazoret. The point of this deck, again, is aggro. So 37 creatures. The curve on this deck is ridiculous. There are 2 0-drops. There are 22 1-drops in this deck. And then it goes on down. There's 22 drops, 11 3-drops. There's 9 4-drops. 1 is Kari Zev, another is a morph creature, so it could be less. There's 1 5-drop. So, super low to the ground. We have, again, 22 1-drops, including Bomat Carrier, who is just like Hazoret there, seen a small spike. This is essentially a Raging Goblin, a 1/1 haste. This may eventually give us some extra cards. I'm more interested in the haste. Signal Pest is not going to get a lot of damage in itself, but will give the team. Battle Cry is a great effect in this deck. We have Hope. I actually have a new commander deck I'll show shortly that is piloted by Hope. This is essentially another 1/1 flyer. It's just a 1-drop evasive creature. Don't really care about the sack effect too much. Mog Fanatic is a fantastic 1-drop. This is actually a good card in most creature-based decks. If you're seeing a stronger uptick in your groups with things like a Noble Hierarch, a Lotus Cobra, or something like even a Notion Thief or a Hermit Druid, this thing kills those. And if it's not killing those, it's at least pinging for 1. This is a really underrated card, and I mean, it looks bad, but depending on what your opponents are playing, this could actually be a very good card. Monastery Swift Spear is your typical 1-drop haste or ramp. Flame Blade Adept is a somewhat variant. It just doesn't have haste, and it's just gaining menace over that. We have Legion Loyalist for another Raging Goblin with some upside. Soul Scar Mage is a nice 1-drop 1/2. We got the prowess from the Swift Spear back. Frenzy Goblin is probably one of the best 1-drops in the entire deck. So this deck does obviously fail to bigger creatures. So something like this early can continually prevent one of those creatures from blocking and killing our creatures. We have a Revoker. We're on to the 2-drops. This is great because it can shut off some fetch land, mana rock, whatever you want. We have Irish Shaman. This is usually actually a 3-drop. I was going to put this before Revoker. I don't know why I switched that. Anyways, this is typically a 3-drop because it'll make her slightly bigger. She has Menace before Menace was a key word. Menace is fantastic in this deck because, again, I'm eventually going to start trading my creatures poorly in combat. The best I can do is get as much damage as fast as possible, and Menace creatures are really good. We have Harsh Mentor to get some triggered damage off. This replaces Zozu the Punisher. Zozu was very easy to play around simply by fending off that damage. Harsh Mentor is much harder to play around. We have a new card, the Earthshaker. I really like this card. Again, it has a little bit of anti-block tech, and while the deck has 35 lands total, eventually I may hit that 6 mana there to eternalize it. There is Kari Zev. She is still a fantastic inclusion. This is a 2-drop 1/3, but she does attack for 3 damage. That little monkey there. Dragon Whisper is typically flying in the air. It's nice to get a little evasion on him. We have an Ash Zealot, one of my favorite 2-drops. Again, haste is fantastic. First strike is fantastic. There's a few aura enchantments in the deck. Putting those on her, probably the best. We have Scourge Wolf, is just typically a 2/2 double strike. Delirium's most likely not going to turn on. We have Grinzo, another ideal general for this type of deck, since I'm swarming the board with lots of little dudes. I'm not really going to go their creatures. I'm more likely to just try to get stuff off their deck. We have Blood Knight for another first strike. No haste, but the pro white sometimes helps. The deck is actually, of the 100 cards here, 4 cards are not foil, one being Blood Knight. I actually prefer this over the Planar Chaos one, the normal one, so I'm not going to bother foiling it. The other cards are like Soul Ring, which I don't care about. You'll get to it, we'll get there. Stigma Lasher is another, we're still in the 2-drops, the Hate Bears of red, essentially. A Wither is nice, especially if it has a bigger enchantment on it. That Prevention of Life Gain is 100% the reason he's in the deck. Like, stopping something like an Alluro deck from gaining life can just make it so you can actually win the game. We have Goblin War Driver. This is sneaky. It looks not threatening, but anything that has Battle Cry on a deck like this, where I'm just trying to get 4 or 5 creatures out before turn 3 or 4, that's a very big uptick in damage. We have Pia. This is a new inclusion, mainly because I wanted to have some kind of anti-block tech, and she does come with a flyer in the air. Pia Nulla did not make the cut. We have Storm Cult Occultist. This is for trample and a little bit of card draw. We do have, of course, 1 Madness Enabler there, so we can sometimes trick her out. We have Sin Prodder, and again, Menace, super important here. I don't even care too much about the card draw, it's just that 3-power Menace body is actually very good. We have Handwear Garrison. I think last time I was recording Kari, I mentioned I had assembled the monster there, the melded creature, 2 or 3 times. I've done it once more, and I still have this land. So yes, I do have the potential to assemble and meld this creature. Otherwise, it just is essentially a Hero of Blade hold for red, creating 1/1 tokens. We have Scab, Clan Berserker. I love this card. So this just needs to connect once, and all of a sudden it's another punishment effect. Even if I can't get through in combat, she'll start just pinging people for casting spells for 2. Really good effect. Prophetic Flame Speaker is, again, I wish this was legendary. This would 100% be a commander of a deck if he was legendary. But a double striker trample is great. Card advantage is also very good. Flame Wake Phoenix tends to come back. Flying haste 2 power, nice. Mind Sparker is another way of just picking damage out of nowhere, and the First Strike is actually really good too. Menace and First Strike are the 2 keywords I like the most. Double Strike, ideally, there's just not enough Double Strike. But Menace and First Strike are the best keywords of this deck. Flame Tongue is one of our very few bits of spot removal. We're up to the 4-drops. The 4-drops have to be very important to make the cut in this deck, and having a 4-drop that can attack and remove a blocker is definitely good enough. Flame Tongue has earned his spot in this deck. Hellrider is another 4-drop of incredible relevance. Again, if I just have 5 creatures and then Hellrider resolves, I can attack and dome someone for 6 before combat damage even occurs. Like, this is one of the game enders. Jessica is a personal pet favorite. I have a copy of her in here because I love Jessica. And the First Striker haste with that little ping ability, it's still pretty relevant. Hero of Oxide Ridge is another 4-drop game-ending spell. Like, again, if I have just 4 or 5 creatures on the board, then all of a sudden opponents can't block with weenies. And that Battle Cry, this does actually amount to a lot of damage. It's hard to describe this if you're playing EDH and you frequently don't see aggro decks, or if you haven't been exposed to aggro decks. The damage output of this deck, assuming I don't get like mana screwed and like bounced immediately, it's actually very scary. Like around turn 4 or 5, I'm usually cranking out. It's a rough average, but essentially anything with battle cry is just 100% threat. Skyship Stalker, I am still testing here. I have recently cut Stormbreath Dragon and Thundermaw Hellkite because they were 5 drops compared to a 4 drop. Thundermaw and Stormbreath are strictly better creatures, yes, but the mana cost on this deck is such an influx experiment that Skyship is actually, I'm seeing, working faster and better than those two. So he's still in the deck. I may go back and forth, but this is essentially a 4/4/3 flying with 3 different abilities. The haste doesn't, it's situational. His effects are good enough that he's still in the deck. I can't pronounce this word. This dragon is here mainly because of Hazoret. It's one way of getting rid of our hand. There's not a lot of like grafted skull cap effects in the deck, but this is one way of making it so I can always attack with Hazoret, have a much better control over my hand size, and eventually wreak some card advantage. We have a Blistering Firecat. This is more or less a 3-drop that stays hidden. So we have 2 morph creatures, the Megamorph one and this one. And I really like this one because this one, again, if I get a battle cry and on this, the trample effect, this could sometimes be, if there's enchantments on this. I've had this swing for 15 damage by itself once, and then it's just fun. And again, a new card is Glorybringer. This is one of the other cards that replace the Stormbreath and or Thundermaw, essentially because, like Flame Tongue, it's going to remove a creature and still have me something that I can attack with. Now we're down to the spells. Again, we are super low to the ground. That was the top end of the deck where those 4 and 5 drops. There's not going to be any 4 or 5 drops in here. We have Lightning Bolt. These are essentially ways of removing blockers or doing last bits of damage. Chain Lightning and a Rift Bolt, which is going to be suspended. So 3 Lightning Bolt variants. We have a Flame Slash for removing more creatures, Mizium Mortars for removing more creatures, and Devastating Summons. Again, this is something newish. This was not in Kari Zev. This is here mainly for Hazoret, because she will survive the damage, and I can, if I get Hazoret out and I have enough to wipe everyone's lands, or if I can keep like a land in hand and then resolve this, who knows. It's just, this is a good card with Hazoret, because if I can just get it where people can't actually deal with Hazoret and I can continually attack with her, it's gonna be game. And this only costs 2 mana, so super good. And we have a Dynacharge. I love Trumpet Blasts. I had to take Trumpet Blast out of the deck. Dynacharge is a strictly better Trumpet Blast, although I can't target opponent's creatures. But Hazoret's ability, I can't cast Trumpet Blast after declaring Hazoret as an attacker if I have more than 2 cards in hand. Like if I have 2 cards in hand, one being Trumpet Blast, I can't go to combat and cast Trumpet Blast and then attack with Hazoret, because she's not attacking. It's just that complication made it so I could not run Trumpet Blast in here efficiently. I mean, I still could and just discard it or use it after I dumped my hand, but that issue came up twice in 2 different games, and I just took it out. Dynacharge, although, I can cast before I have to declare, so that's super good. This is like one of the game-ending spells. This is literally, this does not appear threatening at all, but if I have 6 creatures on the board, that's plus 12 damage on top of whatever damage they're already doing. We have Reckless Charge as a 1-drop, essentially a kind of lightning bolt effect. It does give haste to a creature. We have Brute Force, which is just a giant growth. We have Brute Strength, which is another giant growth. This is important. It has trample. Hazoret does not have trample, so this can give her trample. Invigorated Rampage, same thing, is a plus 4/0 in trample or on 2 other creatures. Again, trample is the only reason this is in here. And Act of Treason plus Kari's Expertise, 2 of these theft spells. Again, this type of deck can run into issues if an opponent simply has a bigger creature. This type of deck also straight fails to something like an Atraxa or a Baneslayer Angel, something with big life-linking body that can just suck up the damage and undo the damage I'm doing. My only answers to that are to kill it or to take it for a turn. Hopefully that's enough to end it. Kari Zev's Expertise is fantastic because it allows me to drop. Again, my deck has 22 drops, so I'm almost always going to be able to drop a free spell off Kari Zev's Expertise. And the last card that's not a permanent is, or the last spell, Gamble. I mean, I'm trying to empty my hand for Hazoret to attack. I might as well go get something relevant and hope to keep it. Let's go on to the last bit of permanents before we hit lands. There are a few auras. We have Hammerhand. It's a small boost, but this is here so something can't block. Consuming Fervor is another lightning bolt effect. Essentially, this could go on Hazoret or some other creature with like Menace, something that's going to get through. We have Dust Corona is essentially a shock to the opponent's body. It's just going to get on one creature that has some kind of evasion for the turn and get some extra damage in there. We have Cartouche of Zeal. Just like the Hammer Hand, this is here just so something can't block for a turn. Volcanic Strength is for the random Mountain Walk, but I mean 2 mana for a permanent +2/+2 boost is actually pretty good. Madcap Skills is back in the deck. This is great to put on Hazoret or just anything that has a high damage output. The Menace body, especially putting this on a first striker, something like the Ashen Zealot, makes for a nice swinging body. Then we have 2 bits of ramp, one being Jeweled Amulet, the other being, there's 3 in here, I'm sorry. Jeweled Amulet's new. This allows me to play a 3-drop on turn 2. It comes out on turn 1, you pay 1 to charge it. Turn 3, you can tap it for mana plus the landfall. We have Lotus Petal. Again, this is here mainly because I'm playing Hazoret. I want to dump my hand, so this cheap mana, I didn't want to put rituals in here, because sometimes you're just wasting the mana off of like a pyretic ritual. This type of ritual, though, can sit on the board until I need it, like if I want to activate Hazoret's ability. We have a Soul Ring. This was not in Kari Zev, I don't believe, because I didn't need it. But this deck does have a 4-drop commander that I would like to see play. Then we have a few bits of equipment. Well, I think actually Bone Splitter is the only equipment. There was a Tenza, Godo's Maul, and the Onaginata were both in this deck because they gave Hazoret Trample. And after playtesting for about 2-3 weeks, I just never wanted to cast and or equip that. I was more interested in discarding it or just sitting on it. Like, this is the only equipment of relevance because it's just something I can cast and equip on turn 2 to whatever 1-drop I played. Key to the City is for more unblockable tech. This does give me a discard trigger, and I can slowly draw cards. I don't have to have a creature to target, but this is again mainly here for Hazoret. We have Smuggler's Copter and Fleet Wheel Cruiser. These are the only 2 vehicles left in the deck. Smuggler's Copter's broke. It is just a dumb card. Seeing this on turn 2 essentially is going to help you scry through your deck, essentially. Well, filter through your deck. And Fleet Wheel Cruiser is just ball lightning that doesn't die at the end of the turn. It's great. Now we have 35 lands. I only have 1 non-basic land in the deck. The previous list with Kari Zev had things like Teetering Peaks and Smoldering Spires because Kari Zev could come out on turn 2 very consistently, and the come into play tap land could just boost her. This deck is different. I am trying to hit landfall 1, 2, and maybe 3, so I didn't want the tap lands. So I have this as the only non-basic, so I have the chance of melting and giving something haste. Everything else is mountains. There are 34 mountains. They are the Time Spiral Mountains. The same mountains you've seen in all my videos. But this is Hazoret the Fervent. Fervent? I don't know. This is a big dumb god. I love the storyline of what they did. It's nice that the Gatewash got their shit handed to them. And it's interesting that... Yeah, I'm not going to go on the storyline. I'm trying very hard also not to rant about Hazoret's Undying Fury, Rage, whatever that spell is. That is just a god-awful spell. This is my current mono red aggro deck. It is, again, more of an experimental deck that's fun to take out on occasions. This is not a deck I would recommend playing if all you do is play multiplayer EDH. When I sit down with this deck, if there's more than one opponent, I have to pick one opponent. Because I'm not going to be able to kill multiple opponents. And the more opponents, the more likely you are to see a board wipe. And this deck cannot come back very easily from a board wipe past Hazoret. Something like a Devastation Tide is even worse. But, yeah. The best recommendation is if you are playing 1v1 frequently, and not against a bunch of combo decks that can just win out of nowhere before turn 5, then try this. It's fun. Aggro decks actually do have some merit in EDH. They're printing more cards that work really good with this, and I'm hoping that they continue printing cards. I've literally added from my original Kari Zev list like 6 new cards from the most recent sets. It's great. And hopefully they continue printing cards like that. But yeah, if you have any idea or feedback for this type of deck, any interesting cards, let me know. I know you can play her in all sorts of different ways. I've seen most lists try to do an all-in, like blister core weird kind of like one-hit kill you, where they dump their hand, double strike, or give her trample, pump, 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 and dead. I mean, I'm sure that works. I don't know what the win percent chance of that is going to be against most opponents. I would rather just flood the board consistently and have every game have a consistent damage output. And then maybe if I get wiped, I can still recover. But yeah, I like Hazi. This is an interesting deck. I like Kari Zev too. I may end up going back to her depending on how... I like both. For the time being, I'm going to keep this deck as is and continue playing. But yeah, any feedback, always open. I hope you guys have a good day.